Welcome to the Stoic Golden Tribe, where enduring wisdom meets the strength of presence, and where we uncover the truths modern society refuses to teach men. There's something deeply unsettling that happens when a woman no longer values you. But what hurts her the most isn't your anger, your silence, or your withdrawal. It's what happens when you finally start moving on, with peace, with purpose, and without needing her validation. When a man reclaims his self-respect, it shakes something inside her that no words can comfort. Why? Because now she realizes she lost something stable, something rare, something powerful. And that realization is what stings the most. Like, share, subscribe, and drop a comment below. I attract through strength, not by chasing validation. Chapter 1. The Pain of Being Taken for Granted. A woman doesn't wake up one day and suddenly stop valuing a man. It happens slowly but over time, like a flame that flickers before it fades. And many men don't see it happening until it's already too late. You start noticing the shift in her energy, the way she no longer says thank you, the way her compliments dry up, and the way she seems to find fault in everything you do. At first, you think it's stress. Maybe she's just overwhelmed, but then you realize she's stopped appreciating your presence because she assumed you'd never leave. And that assumption is where the damage begins. In the world of emotional dynamics, the most painful place for a man is to be consistent and good to a woman who has stopped seeing his worth. You bring her peace, loyalty, love, and structure, and somehow she treats it like routine. But here's the truth. Women are emotional beings, and when they grow emotionally comfortable, they often start to believe that your effort is guaranteed. Let me say this clearly to every man listening. When you're consistent, loving, emotionally present, and dependable, many women stop noticing your power because they begin to expect it. Not because you lost value, but because they've grown blind to it. The most tragic part? The better you treat her while she's in this state, the less she respects you. Not because you're weak, but because she's lost connection to your edge. Historically, this dynamic has echoed across time. In the early 1800s, German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer spoke bitterly about the changing affections of women and how often men mistake love for lasting loyalty. He observed how women, if not consciously grounded in self-awareness, often drift toward excitement over stability. But you must understand, the issue isn't your stability, it's her boredom with safety, and that boredom breeds disrespect. Now here's where it hurts her the most. When a man, after being ignored, undervalued, and taken for granted, finally stops explaining himself, when he no longer argues, begs, or tries to prove his worth, and instead begins to pull away with silence and certainty, that's when everything shifts. That's when she starts to feel something she didn't expect: regret. She thought he'd never leave. She thought his loyalty meant he'd tolerate being neglected. But when he begins to redirect his energy inward, focusing on his health, his mission, his mind, and his peace, she feels it, even if she doesn't admit it. This is where your emotional intelligence as a man must rise. You don't need to explode. You don't need to guilt her. You simply need to evolve and remove your presence like a king who no longer grants his audience. No harsh words, just absence. And that silence becomes thunder in her world. Because here's the truth. When a man withdraws from a woman who took him for granted, her world loses its emotional stability. She may not have said thank you when you were checking in, supporting her, showing up consistently, but now she notices the silence. Now she notices the vacuum. And the reality sets in. She lost something solid while chasing a feeling that was never permanent. The pain she feels isn't from your absence. It's from the realization that she devalued something real for something temporary. A man of consistency, loyalty, and emotional stability is a rare find. And when he's gone, that space doesn't get filled with ease. That's what stings. A man named Daniel had been with his partner for 5 years. He paid the bills, showed up emotionally, supported her career, and never once cheated. But slowly, she started treating him like furniture, present but unnoticed. She rolled her eyes at his suggestions. She stopped dressing up for their dates. She forgot his birthday. And one day, after reflecting deeply, Daniel stopped initiating. No more good morning texts, no more favors, no more emotional comfort. He didn't ghost her, he just shifted his energy. And within a week, her tone changed. She became softer, more attentive, more anxious to connect. But by then, Daniel's mind had moved on, not to another woman, but to himself. That story plays out in many forms across the world every single day. And if you're a man listening to this and realizing you've been Daniel, understand this. You're not weak for loving deeply, but you are foolish if you stay in a place where your value is no longer seen. Train your emotional awareness. Study her behavior. Reflect honestly. And when it's clear you're no longer appreciated, don't stay and beg, evolve and walk. Because what hurts her the most isn't you leaving. It's you becoming a man she no longer has access to. And that pain lasts far longer than an argument. Drop a comment below. I reclaim my value in silence, not in arguments. Chapter 2. When peace becomes power, not a weakness. There's a moment in every man's life when he realizes that peace isn't just a feeling, it's a form of power, especially in relationships. The problem is, many men confuse silence with weakness, and many women confuse emotional peace with a lack of passion. But in truth, a peaceful man is not a passive man. He is a dangerous man who has mastered the war within. When a woman doesn't value you, she often does so under the illusion that you are soft, that your calmness is a sign of submission, that your willingness to keep peace is a lack of options, and so she tests you emotionally, mentally, and sometimes even spiritually. She withdraws, she dismisses, she picks fights over small things just to see how you react. And in the background of all this, you stay still, you stay present, you stay calm. But here's the twist. The calm man is the man she fears the most once he decides he's done. Because the moment he stops responding, not out of pain but out of growth, she realizes he's no longer emotionally dependent on her validation. That's when the shift happens. That's when peace becomes power. Let's go back in history for a moment. In ancient Rome, the Stoics believed that the highest form of strength was ataraxia, a state of inner stillness where no external force could disturb your mind. Seneca once wrote, "No man is free who is not master of himself." That's the energy of a man who has been overlooked, disrespected, and underappreciated, but chooses not to react with chaos. Instead, he responds with clarity. See, most women are conditioned to expect emotional battles from men. They're used to seeing men beg, argue, explain themselves, or chase validation when they feel undervalued. But when you, the man, do the opposite, when you step into your peace and hold it like a shield, that's when your power becomes undeniable. It confuses her. It disarms her because she doesn't know how to control a man who doesn't need to be controlled. There's a real-life story of a man named Elijah. He was with his girlfriend for 3 years. He supported her through school, was there during her family drama, and helped her build her small business. Over time, she began treating him like background noise. She started to text less. She dismissed his thoughts. She compared him to other men on social media. But Elijah didn't argue. He didn't chase. Instead, he started rising earlier, hitting the gym, spending time with brothers who sharpened his mindset, and meditating in silence. He stopped asking for her attention. He stopped explaining his actions. He became so grounded in peace that her chaos had no effect anymore. One day she asked, "Why don't you fight for us like you used to?" And he simply replied, "Because I realized I was the only one fighting." That kind of peace is painful to a woman who once believed she could always trigger you, because now her drama no longer fuels your emotion. It only exposes her instability, and that reflection hurts. Let me be clear, when you stop giving emotional reactions to someone who doesn't value you, it creates two paths. Either she'll elevate to meet your energy, or she'll collapse under her own chaos, but either way, you win, because you've already moved on emotionally. Men often underestimate how powerful it is to not explain themselves, to simply evolve in silence. The calm man is not the broken man, he is the rebuilt man. And when you become that version of yourself, she feels the shift. It shows in your voice, in your posture, in your absence, because the truth is, nothing disturbs a woman more than the man she once took for granted suddenly glowing without her. It's not just that you left, when it's that you became better after you left. So how do you build that peace? You do the hard work. You sit with your pain, not in it. You stop seeking her validation and start validating yourself through action. You build your body, you build your mind, you rebuild your mission, you take walks without your phone, you learn to sit in silence and sharpen your spirit. You become untriggerable. That is true power. A woman who doesn't value you expects you to crumble when she pulls away. But when you rise instead, she feels it deep, because now she has no control. And what hurts the most is that you didn't have to hurt her. You just had to stop reacting. This doesn't mean you become cold. It means you become clear. It means your self-worth is no longer negotiated through her mood swings. It means your masculinity is no longer attached to her attention. It means you are now driven by purpose, not pain. And when a man steps into that version of himself, that's when life opens doors that she no longer has the key to. Because here's the truth, brother. Your peace is not a weakness. It's the proof that you no longer need her to recognize your value, because you already do. Drop a comment below. My peace is power, not silence. Chapter 3. When you stop needing her to see your worth. There comes a moment when a man wakes up, not physically, but emotionally and spiritually, and sees the truth with painful clarity. He's been waiting on a woman to recognize what he's always known deep down, his own worth. And that moment, that awakening, is both liberating and heartbreaking. For so long, you may have believed that if you just loved her better, showed up harder, or proved yourself more, she would finally see what kind of man she had. You tolerated the subtle disrespect. You ignored the diminishing affection. You explained yourself over and over, hoping that maybe, just maybe, she'd understand what she was about to lose. But let me be very real with you. A woman who doesn't value you will never see your worth while you're trying to convince her of it. Because to convince is to lower yourself. It tells her you don't believe in your value unless she confirms it. And the truth is that desperation will only blind her further. This isn't about being cold, it's about being aware. Because emotional intelligence begins the moment you stop begging for someone to see your worth and start walking in it with or without them. There's a powerful quote from author David Dada. The masculine grows by challenge, but the feminine grows by praise. Understand what that means. When a woman stops valuing you, it's often because she no longer feels the emotional challenge she once did. You've become predictable, familiar, safe. But in trying to love her better, you may have actually made her feel less. And here's what hurts her the most: when you stop trying to be seen, because that's the moment she starts looking. This doesn't mean playing games or pretending you don't care. It means you actually stop needing her attention to feel whole. You stop checking if she watched your story. You stop waiting for a reply. You stop tailoring your decisions around her mood swings. You just move with clarity, with conviction, with power. This shift creates an emotional earthquake in her world, because now you're not angry, you're not bitter, you're just gone. Not physically, but emotionally, spiritually, energetically, you've detached. Let me tell you about Malik. Malik was with his girlfriend for 4 years. During the last year, she became distant. Her texts became dry. Her compliments stopped. She stopped noticing when he got new opportunities, new clothes, even when he changed his lifestyle. She'd scroll her phone when he talked. She would flirt with attention from others in front of him. But Malik kept holding on, until one night, something snapped. It wasn't a fight, it wasn't a dramatic breakup, it was just a realization. He looked at her across the room and realized, I've been trying to be enough for someone who doesn't even see me. From that day on, Malik stopped explaining. He started reading more. He joined a business mastermind. He fixed his posture. He cleaned his space. He even went 30 days without social media. He wasn't waiting to be seen anymore. He had already seen himself. 2 months later, she came back. But by then, Malik didn't respond with bitterness. He responded with boundaries. Why? Because he no longer needed her to validate who he was becoming. That's what hurts a woman the most when she didn't value you, seeing you become everything she didn't believe you could be, and knowing she no longer has access to it. Let's go deeper for a second. You are not here to be validated by temporary emotions. You are here to build something permanent within yourself. And once you tap into that level of clarity, your energy becomes rare. Women feel it, people respect it, and power naturally begins to orbit around you. This is the sacred lesson of masculine energy. It doesn't chase recognition. It becomes undeniable through action, presence, and direction. And here's where it gets real. When a woman doesn't value you, you have a choice. You can shrink or you can sharpen. And the man who sharpens will always outgrow the situation that tried to make him forget who he was. That growth is felt. It shows in how you walk into a room without needing to be noticed. It shows in how you listen without reacting. It shows in how you refuse to explain your evolution to people who stopped believing in you. And eventually she sees it. The woman who once rolled her eyes at your goals now hears about your results from others. The woman who dismissed your plans now watches you lead others with influence. The woman who once said you were too emotional now wishes she could reach your silence. But by then, it's too late. Because the man you've become doesn't need her anymore. He respects what was, but no longer sees her as necessary for what is. And that level of emotional independence is what women fear the most, not because you hurt her, but because she realizes she had everything she needed and lost it trying to test your limits. Brothers, understand this. You don't need her to see your worth. You need to see your own so clearly that her opinion becomes irrelevant to your direction. Let go of needing to be chosen. Let go of needing to be noticed. Instead, become. Become a man whose presence is earned, not expected. And watch how many doors open quietly. Drop a comment below. I don't need to be seen to know my worth. Chapter 4. The man she can no longer reach. There is a rare kind of man who learns how to walk away, not with anger, not with revenge in his heart, but with peace in his soul. And that man is unforgettable. Because while most men are reactive, yelling, explaining, begging, or trying to fix the situation, this man simply steps back. He doesn't announce his departure. He doesn't try to make her jealous. He just stops giving her what she once took for granted, his energy. You see, when a woman doesn't value you, the loudest message isn't in what you say, it's in what you no longer give. Your time, your presence, your attention, your emotional effort. These are the currencies of real men. And once you stop spending them where they're not appreciated, everything changes. At first, she might feel relieved. She may even pretend not to notice. But over time, something unsettling begins to grow in her. The realization that you're not coming back. Not because you're punishing her, but because you've grown past needing her recognition to validate your existence. Let's return to the ancient world for a second. In the story of Odysseus, the great Greek warrior left home for war and faced years of storms, monsters, and temptations. But his journey wasn't just physical, it was spiritual. He left as a man of war and returned as a man of wisdom. Some people in his life thought he was dead. Others moved on, but he came back with something they didn't expect, a deeper understanding of who he was. That's what this chapter is about. The journey a man takes after being undervalued, and who he becomes in the silence. Because make no mistake, brother, what hurts a woman the most is not that you left, it's that you returned to yourself. You see, most women assume men will always orbit them, that no matter how poorly they treat you, you'll always come back around, that your loyalty is unconditional, that your consistency is weakness. But the moment she realizes you're no longer revolving around her, that's when it all shifts. You become unreachable. Not because you're hiding, but because she no longer has the emotional access she once had. She can text, but your replies are slow. She can call, but your tone is no longer soft. She can apologize, but you no longer feel the need to open up. Because the version of you she once knew is gone. You've upgraded. And when you upgrade as a man, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, the people who once ignored you come back confused. They want to reconnect, but they're not compatible with who you've become. They want the old version of you, the version that tolerated being misunderstood, undervalued, and taken for granted. But that version died quietly, and you buried him with dignity. Let me tell you a story. There was a man named Roman. He loved deeply. He was consistent. He poured into his woman every single day. But she outgrew the fantasy of stability and chased fleeting excitement. She said he was boring, too predictable, too kind. So Roman stopped fighting for her attention and started fighting for himself. He read books, he studied history, he worked out daily, he cleaned his apartment, he upgraded his wardrobe, and more importantly, he upgraded his self-worth. 6 months later, she texted him. "I miss you," he replied. "I don't miss the version of me that tolerated being unseen." And that was it. Because Roman had become the man she could no longer reach, not out of spite, but because he had moved into a new chapter of his life and she wasn't written into it. That's what emotional intelligence looks like. That's what masculine evolution feels like. It's not about hurting her, it's about healing yourself. So what happens when you fully let go of needing her? You gain your time back, you gain your clarity back, you gain your direction back. You stop reacting and start leading. You become a man with standards, a man with vision, a man who doesn't fold when he's undervalued, but rises. This is the man that women silently admire, but loudly regret losing. The man who leaves not with drama, but with dignity. The man who doesn't post quotes about being a good guy. He becomes the blueprint of one. And here's the hardest truth. Once you become that man, she will miss you. Not because you tried to make her miss you, but because you stopped needing her altogether. She'll miss your stability. She'll miss your peace. She'll miss the quiet strength in your presence. But most of all, she'll miss the version of herself who felt safe in your energy. And that will hurt more than anything. So don't chase, don't beg, don't try to be seen. Just evolve, because the man who walks in quiet strength becomes the one whose absence speaks louder than words ever could. Let the silence remind her of what she had. Let your growth show her what she lost. And let your peace remind you of who you've become. Drop a comment below. I've become the man she can no longer reach.